Stories involving people calling the cops on black individuals who are just living life and doing nothing wrong have flooded the headlines throughout the entire year. But what about black Americans who go to the bank and just attempt to cash or deposit their paychecks, their hard-earned paychecks? Well, many black people throughout the country actually have a difficult time doing that because some bank tellers automatically assume that the checks are fraudulent. That's what happened to Paul McCowns from Brooklyn, Ohio. He is a new employee at an electric company and he visited a local Huntington Bank branch. Since he wasn't a regular customer at the bank, he was asked to present 2 forms of identification as well as a fingerprint, and he readily offered all 3. So far, everything's fine. I've had a similar experience, right? It makes sense. You want to make sure that there's no fraud going on or identity fraud, but this is when things start to get bad. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I saw an episode of Blackish, and they're kidding around about how the dad gets easily triggered if anybody says anything that sounds slightly racist, right? So this is not one of those situations. He's like, oh, okay, I'm at a new bank, no problem. Here's fingerprints, ID, anything you need. He did everything that was asked of him.
Exactly.
Just be absolutely clear about that.
Then things start to get a little shady. So bank employees were still suspicious of the roughly $1,000 paycheck. And after several calls to his employer went unanswered, they declined to complete the transaction. At that point, McCowns just left the bank thinking, okay, well, they don't believe me, it is what it is, I'm just gonna leave. But the teller called the police on him. And the police showed up and they detained him. They detained him and put him in the in the back seat of the police cruiser until they could get a hold of his boss. And at that point, the boss let the cops know, yeah, he's my employee. Yes, he got paid. Yes, that is a check that was given to him. It is not fraudulent. Please let him go. It's insane, and apparently this happens quite often, and I'll give you some other examples.
We need to call this what it is. It's a hate crime. It is a hate crime, and until we change the law, this is gonna keep happening. In a context of business and civil law, if you frivolously sue people, you get in trouble. We need a law so that you can't frivolously call the police on, in particular, people of color. Because what was done to this individual is a hate crime, and it needs to start being treated legally like it's a hate crime.
So that's a really interesting point. Let me back it up with a couple of examples and a quote here. So Paul Butler is a professor at Georgetown Law and the author of Chokehold, Policing Black Men. And he talks about and writes about unnecessary 911 calls and what they lead to. He says, when the police are called on African Americans, it has a very negative impact on those black people, even if they are not arrested or beat up or killed. But remember, unfortunately, that is a very real possibility in today's America. And we have a lot of instances where an innocent person has 911 called on him, but then the cops think, oh, he might be armed, and then you've got a massive, terrible situation. But Professor Butler's point is, even if that doesn't happen, it has significant negative consequences. He says, you're required to justify your existence and your presence in a white space. It makes you feel like less of a citizen and less of a human being. It's impossible to overstate the adverse consequences. And that is exactly right, because they put Paul in this case in a situation where he had to constantly justify his existence and his humanity. Yes, I'm a real person. Yes, that's a real check. Yes, I have a real job. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. You need identification, etc. Fine, okay. We don't believe you. We're not going to give you the money. Not fine. We don't believe you. We're going to arrest you, even though we have no evidence that what you're saying is wrong, right? We're going to call the cops on you preemptively because you're black. We don't believe you. And we had a cop on the show once who said he's white anyway, but he was talking about policing African Americans and how brutal cops have been throughout. And he said, African Americans in this country have unanimously been telling you that cops have been abusing them for over 100 years. Did you think they were all lying to you? And unfortunately, for a lot of folks in this country, the answer is yes. They just don't believe them no matter what happens. And that is a crazy extra burden to put on some of our citizens.
And the thing is, if you're a minority in America, especially if you're a black man in America, there's no winning. There's literally nothing you can do to win, because let's say you're struggling financially and you need some help. Automatically, people make all sorts of assumptions about you and they push all sorts of stereotypes about you. But even if you do what everyone demands that you do, right? Go out there, work hard, earn a paycheck, earn a living, you still have to deal with this. Like, there's no winning. There's literally nothing that some black men in this country can do that will erase, years of stereotypes and nonsense about who they are and what they're about.
I guarantee you in the comments below, there'll be some people who say, oh yeah, he should have gotten a job. No, he had a job, that's the whole point, he was trying to pay, but it doesn't matter because they're not listening. They don't care, they see the race and they're done with it, right? Now, we, on the other hand, defend everyone. If it happened to a white guy, that's also terrible, but historically and currently, disproportionately, it happens to African Americans. More famous examples, black women playing golf, have cops called on them. They're in the middle of a golf course. Well, how could they have possibly snuck out and done what wrong? That's insane. Somebody eating at Subway was like, oh, what, he's eating a sandwich at Subway.
Well,
why would anybody call, like, right? But seriously, like, if you're a right winger, if you see a white guy in a Subway, would you just be like, oh, we got to call the cops on him? No, you know you wouldn't. You know you wouldn't. And so you know you wouldn't have to deal with that. Entering their own apartment buildings, barbecuing at a public park where there's a barbecue pit, right? And then babysitting white children, all these different jobs. They're in the middle of their jobs. But my favorite one was a 12-year-old boy who got a job mowing lawns, and the neighbors called the cops on him. And the person who hired him, the woman who hired him, was like, I don't understand why would a person up to no good come and mow my lawn? That doesn't make any sense, right? And like who? Like, is it a ruse to rob? I mean, I don't know. And it's a 12-year-old. And yet, this is what black people deal with all the time in America. And so for other people to say, no, I don't acknowledge it, and I don't care, and it doesn't matter, and they're just whining, it is maddening. And it's amazing that black folks in this country are not more angry.
So can we agree we have to have hate crimes legislation that calls and treats these acts what they are, which are hate crimes?
I don't know if I disagree with you on hate crimes. I feel like that, I think this is discrimination. I think that there should be consequences for the teller, because clearly this individual was profiled and judged based on the color of his skin. But hate crimes, I mean, I just have an issue with.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that's gonna come up is you don't want people too reticent to call the cops. But the problem is, these folks are calling the cops like it's, they're using it like a takeout service, delivery, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'd like this black man picked up. He's in my neighborhood. By the way, a black female politician going canvassing for votes. Call the cops on her, right? Her mom, who's a grandma, and her tiny little kid were sitting outside in a van. They're like dangerous. Call the cops on him. Jesus Christ. So I'm not sure what the right answer is, because it is a balancing act about calling 911. But I do know maybe the most important, at least first step, is for everybody in the country to at least acknowledge it. It's not asking for too much. But unfortunately, a huge percentage of this country go, no, I hear no evil, I see no evil, I speak no evil, and I never ever want to hear about racism. And for whatever reason, it gets under their skin. Like, but you're not the one being arrested, they are. All we're asking for is tiny bit of empathy, and they get triggered by that. That simple request for empathy needs them, makes them want to find a safe space.
And we're supposed to have regulations in place that protect people, based on their sexual orientation, color of their skin, if they're minorities, right? And I just find it so interesting that when situations like this happen, the bank took responsibility for it, they apologize, end of story, that's it. It appears they're not gonna deal with any type of consequences. But then, I mean, if you are a broadcaster and you accidentally curse on a live broadcast, you'll be fined a ton of money for that, right? So the consequences for accidentally cursing are much more serious than a bank, calling 911, calling the cops on someone who is trying to cash his hard-earned paycheck that was not fraudulent in any way. Like, think about how ridiculous that is. Like, what we prioritize in this country, the types of people who actually get punished and those who don't.
Yeah, there's a final plug-in for hate crime.
Yeah.
To be clear, we would have proportionality in the punishment. So a hate crime that would be calling 911 on someone because they're African American would obviously get punished differently than a hate crime that was violent. But Martin Luther King, in his Unfulfilled Dreams speech in March of '68, had a great line, and I'm going to paraphrase it. And it went something like, you can't legislate what's in someone's heart, but you can make laws that will prevent them from lynching you. Similarly, we've been talking about trying to engage people's empathy, but the reality is all we can do is create laws to prevent this from happening. And we may agree to disagree, but I just believe with a lot of conviction that until we make it illegal and penalized to call people just because of racial factors, it's not gonna stop.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.